Welcome everyone to the Patient Voice Amplified podcast. I'm Adam Charrington and joined with my partner in crime here, Dan Check. Welcome, Dan.
It's fun to be with you again today, Adam.
My pleasure. These are so fun and I appreciate your partnership. And we need to shout out to Jeff, who's taking such good care of us. Jeff Peterson, our producer and editor, and always helping us out. So thanks to Jeff. Well, Dan, we have done several episodes now, and we thought it would be a good idea to just pause and kind of look down the trail. What have we learned so far? And we've interviewed a pretty diverse group of guests, haven't we?
Yeah, it's been fun to see people from the provider side, people from the vendor side, some direct patients, some that are in healthcare, some outside of healthcare, and we've really got a nice diverse group of perspectives.
Yeah, I think so. And I think that's what it's going to take to work together to figure out how do we improve healthcare? How do we listen to the patient more? How do we make sure that there's more synergy there? It takes a lot of perspective. So if you had to just look back, and I want to know what's top of mind for you, what have you gathered and learned from all of our interviews so far? What stood out to you?
Yeah, there have been so many fantastic conversations that we've had, and there are several themes that our guests have discussed. But one thing that it seems almost every conversation comes back to is listening to the patient, really putting them first, center to what you're doing as an organization, at the middle of how you're developing and deploying technology. Here's a few things that I heard from some of our guests this year that point to this willingness and ability to listen that they see as differentiators. Michael O'Neill, that joined us from Get Well Network, he shared that it's so important to have humility and the willingness to listen to the patients, but also to listen to the providers who are caring for those patients. And then he also mentioned the third way that he needs to listen, or that we need to listen as an industry, is to listen to what's happening outside of healthcare. And he brought up the example of his recent hire with somebody that created the Bonvoy app for Marriott. We saw this again when we interviewed Kevin Mabbitt, who came from Disney. Bringing in that outside perspective really marries patient needs with what is working well in other consumer industries.
Yeah. Here's another example I haven't even shared with you yet. We work with Cypher Health, and they've hired someone that came from 911 emergency software technology. And I thought, well, that's an interesting perspective. Someone that has had their hands on a different market, so to speak. And so I think we'll see more and more of that. We've heard of provider organizations hiring from Amazon and others. And I think the point there is we do need that outside perspective. There's lots of good ideas we can bring in. But to get to your first point about listening, that's something that really jumped out to me as well. We've had several point to that. Aaron Bentley, the CIO of Salt Lake City, he talked about including patients in your design. And what does that look like? Not only to get ideas and get specific of what patients need, but it creates ownership. It creates, I would dare say, loyalty for tools, processes when the patient's involved.
Yeah, you see that actually as well when Caroline DeLongchamp shared her experience with the patient and family advisory councils, how they are now key stakeholders in their decision-making process. And you better believe that those patients now have a vested interest in the success of the technology at the organizations. They're going to be advocates and champions for their family members and friends.
Yeah, absolutely. So how do we help our listeners think beyond the principle of listening and get to how do you really make that happen? Because I think a lot of organizations would say, yeah, that's a good idea. Anything come to mind how you can really make that a specific step?
Adam, I think back to our interview with Kevin Mabbitt in recent weeks, and he talked about the process they went through developing that my Disney Experience app and the Magic Band technology. And there were challenges. The rollout wasn't perfect, but they iterated multiple times and got feedback from consumers all along the way to create this app that excuse me, not patients, but
Disney guests, right?
Yeah, Disney guests
right.
are able to personalize and leverage. But he talked about the need for the guests to give a little bit and to understand that the more they share, the better that they were able to help the guests and create a great experience. So this concept of we need to know a little bit about you for us to best help you. I think if we can help as an industry, help patients understand that while we want their data to be protected and locked down, the more that a healthcare organization can know about them, the better they can deliver care and personalized care. I think that's a really important concept.
I love that answer. And Kevin described it really well. He said, we need to know you, be useful to you, be able to support you, to enable you, right? It's not just the idea that, well, I'm a human, I'm a patient, so what do I think I need? I think healthcare tech vendors, healthcare providers, even class, we need to remove ourselves from that patient hat and truly go out and say, okay, what do you need? What else would help you participate in your care more? We know that's how costs can be driven down. We know that's how experiences can improve, and overall healthcare should improve if we do that.
Right.
You know, related to that, I think of our friend Jerry Mansfield. Always appreciate his perspective. He talked over and over about listening to patients and also their families. He was pretty passionate about that. Do you remember the 3 things he talked to us about? Partner with patients, listen to them, and make it easy. Make it easy to engage. And I couldn't agree more. I think sometimes we might overthink this, and perhaps we just need to simplify and say, well, what would help me communicate with my clinician in a better way? And I think that's one place we can
he also
start.
made an interesting point that this isn't a one-time process to go and understand your patient needs and family needs.
Yes.
He made the point to go see and listen over and over and over, to not just survey patients to understand what they want, but to go and be in the room when they're receiving care, to find those digital touch points and see what the friction points are. Where is there an opportunity to make this better as an organization? Make some change, and then go and look at it again and continuously refine your process, always with the patient in mind.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's not a one-time conversation, right? It should be iterative and continuous. I liked how Caroline, going back to her, she talked about involving families. She reiterated it's got to be easy or they won't use it. So related to what we're saying, make sure that not only do we listen to individual patients, but the stakeholders around that patient. So much of our care is done outside of the purview of hospitals and our clinicians. A ton of it comes through family, neighborhoods, churches, etc. There's a ton of engagement that comes from that.
Yeah, I really liked Caroline's. She shared an experience of creating these patient stories that they had started to film, and they helped patients write and then tell their story. And they were bringing those into meetings with caregivers and others within the organization. So you're absolutely right. There are a lot of stakeholders here. And the patient experience isn't only solved through technology. It's solved through those face-to-face interactions that they have from the time they enter your organization to the time that they're discharged and beyond. And the more that you can help your organization and those that work with you inside and outside of direct patient care, if they can understand patient needs and desires and put the patient first, I just truly believe that patient satisfaction scores will go through the roof. And the scores, frankly, aren't as important as, are the patients really having a great experience? Do they want to come back to my organization over and over and over again?
Right. And I want to come back to that in a moment, but that's part of the hypothesis you and I have been talking about. If you focus on what the patient needs, some of those other outcomes like loyalty and no-show rates, those things can improve naturally. They're definitely connected. So your last comment made me think of what we learned from Charity Horsley, our classmate, our coworker here at class. Loved her passion and perspective on this. And you might remember she told a story about the home or the local physician that would come and visit and really connect. Loved that example. She said, make it feel like patients are going to see a friend. Make yourself available for when the patients want to see you and engage. I hope there's a day coming when care is more and more accessible. Dan, I think of a single parent that has to take time off work to go and provide care for their family. If there are more options, make it easier for patients. They can see their clinician, receive care when they need it, when they want it. That's another example. Let's make access, let's provide better options for access there. So,
Charity brought up a good point. She has an interesting background in operations, and she talked about how to stay relevant, organizations are really going to have to listen to patients as they understand the needs in their local area. And one of the things that she brought up is operationally, not only are we trying to solve some of these patient challenges through technology, but there's an operations aspect to this. And when you think of the holistic picture of people, process, technology, if you can solve some of those process challenges, either through technology or by changing process that creates a more patient-centric experience, I think you're naturally going to create some patient loyalty, some increased patient satisfaction in your local area.
Great example. What else jumped out to you as you look back at some of our other guests? Any meaningful quotes, any specific learnings that you want to share with our audience today?
Yeah, I have a couple more. I'd love to get your thoughts, Adam, on our most recent two guests, Ed Marks and Chris Ross. They're working on this fascinating book together. Both have backgrounds as former or current cancer patients, and so they have a really unique perspective. What stood out to you in our conversations with those two and as they shared their stories?
They seem to really bring the human element into the discussion. And I know that a lot of our conversations have focused on personal healthcare journeys. Put aside the fact they're writing this book for just a moment. Think about what both of them bring to the table. They're both patients that have observed healthcare from the administrative side, but also their own healthcare journey. And I think that's why this matters to all of us. I think that's why it's so critical. As I think of those two interviews, they both bring a different level of intensity and courage to the discussion. So that's what I think of. What did you get out of those conversations?
Yeah, I just loved the humility that both of those leaders had. They had been through this experience. They understood some of the challenges that their patients experienced. That both of them received care in the organizations that they led, and they were humble enough to admit that they hadn't figured everything out and used it as a great learning opportunity to propel their organizations forward. And that helps not only their friends and family, but it helps them as patients long term.
Yeah, absolutely. Ed told the story about trying to download an app from his own organization and how there were dozens of choices and how that felt as a patient. And I think we've all been there. I think we don't have to look far for stories of family or neighbors or coworkers that are struggling just for the basic things. So yeah, they were wonderful, and I can't wait to read that book. I think it's going to be fantastic to learn from them. A couple memorable quotes perhaps I could share, things that I've learned. Rasu Shrestha talked about the different perspective patients have. And he said, patients don't live in the silos that we have created in healthcare. And that image has been something I've shared with others, not only in the podcast, but in our ongoing conversations. It's really true that we've created some unintentional barriers for patients just by building up a revenue cycle process, building up an intake process, building up communication process. It's well-intended services that are there to help improve healthcare, but as a patient, it feels like you're kind of swimming in this sea of confusion. And so I've really appreciated that perspective.
It's interesting, a quote from his interview that stuck out to me that ties in very closely to what you're talking about. He said, it's not about doing digital, it's about being digital. And you think about those silos that we've created in healthcare, as we shift towards a more digital experience for patients, it's not just replicating the old silos and the old experiences in a digital way through technology. It's about completely shifting your mindset as a healthcare organization to creating a digital experience that changes how a patient interacts with your organization. And you no longer have to think about it as their touch point with the front office, and then their touch point with the doctor, and then their touch point with the billing department after the fact. You can create a holistic digital experience that meets the patient where they are, when they're ready to connect, and they don't feel like they're stuck in those silos that you were talking about.
Bob Kaiserman gave a great thought about considering the different patient personas. One size does not fit all. If you think about the needs of a chronic patient versus an episodic patient, and even the different age and other demographics, that can really enhance the experience for the patient. So I appreciated that concept. He taught us to make sure you market to the patients. What a cool idea. Let's go right to the consumer and make sure that they're involved and they feel heard and they can participate in that. So very much like what we've been saying, listen to the patients, involve them, market to them, and think of their unique needs.
It was interesting to hear his change of heart over telehealth. He was one that shared prior to the pandemic. As he worked with different providers throughout the U.S., he cautioned them against telehealth, and he saw it as a way of reducing the interaction between the provider and the patient. And now that it's been rolled out for the past year and a half or so, and we've seen huge successes, he's been won over and sees the benefits of that because it's something that consumers and the patients want.
I want to go to our interview with Laura Adams and talk about someone that's passionate about this and that's trying to help so many figure this out. She said something that was special. She said, remove yourself from the experience, especially when someone tells you, oh, I'm a patient and I know this. We kind of just talked about this, and I thought it was my own idea. I think I got it from Laura. So I really appreciated her sharing that. Anything else that she shared with us that you liked, Dan?
Yeah, she actually shared possibly my favorite soundbite or quote from all of the interviews that we've done this season, and that was, Laura said, make patient centricity the absolute North Star for all decisions at the organization. That is a principle I can get behind 100%. You won't go wrong if you follow the needs of your patients, the desires of your patients, put your patients first, both in how they receive care, but also how you deliver technology to them. Ultimately, the outcomes you're looking for as an organization will come as you focus on the patient.
I love that. Yeah, that's a memorable quote. Here's one from Jerry Mansfield again that he shared. He said, go to the back passenger side door and let the patient drive. So symbolically, that's truly taking a back seat. That means I've got to understand where they want to go and why are they going that way and how can I help them? So we've got some great imagery here with these quotes. Any other interviews that you want to highlight that you've learned from?
Adam, I think most of the things that really made an impact on me, we've already discussed. It's just been really fun to talk to you for the past several minutes about the 12 interviews that we've done this season. You look back on that experience, and we've learned a lot of very interesting and helpful nuggets that hopefully our listeners are appreciating as well, that will maybe influence how they focus on the patient at their organization, how we as patients can better amplify our own voices within our healthcare organizations. I just think there's a wealth of information in here, and excited to continue this on and talk to new people going forward.
Yeah, me too, Dan. It's been great. We're sure learning some things. Maybe just a couple closing thoughts, and at the risk of breaking a class commandment of class has no opinion, only the data speaks, I want to share some final thoughts with you and get your take on this. Some of this we've already said, but let me summarize. Listening to and involving the patient can reconnect you to your purpose in healthcare. I think that's why most people get into healthcare. They truly do care. And call it the bureaucracies we fight or the challenges of regulation or what, healthcare loses its humanity a little bit. So I think that is essential, that by involving the patient, we can reconnect to our purpose. Here's another one. If we focus on the patient, that will add momentum to provider outcomes, which should improve vendor outcomes. Again, we already hinted on this one, and this is I call it our hypothesis, right? As you focus on the patient, their outcomes should improve, their satisfaction score should go up, et cetera, et cetera. And I know we've hit that today already a little bit. Okay, and finally, Jerry told the story of the heart surgery patient that was not eating great, they were not exercising, and he said, okay, well, what are you eating? And they said, bacon and eggs. And he said, well, we need to let's add some fruit to that. He didn't completely come in and said, you need to throw out everything and hop on the treadmill for 5 hours a day. He said, let's start somewhere. And I think that's what this is going to take. We can't overhaul everything overnight. Just starting on some of the basic things, scheduling an appointment. How do we make that easier? Communicating with the clinician. How do you simplify payments? Some of these things. So that's the soapbox I want to stand on for just a moment, my personal perspective. And this is something you and I talk about together every day. So I think this is something that we will see more and more people talk about, more and more people striving to improve, and hopefully we're providing a forum where we can share ideas and people can learn from each other. So, Dan, this has been so fun. I know we've got plans for other episodes coming in the future. You and I talk often about providers we want to interview, other vendors, other people outside of healthcare, and some of our own classmates that we think can add a unique perspective. So it's going to be a lot of fun.
Right. This has been a real pleasure this season, talking with you and others, Adam, and we want to again thank our guests. We'd also like to thank Jeff Peterson and Charlene Bird for their help producing and getting the word out about this podcast to the industry. We invite anybody who would like to be a future guest or has an idea for us of somebody that would be helpful for us to talk to, reach out to us at patientengagement@classresearch.com, and we'll see you on a future episode.
Thanks for listening.